purpose and hope and love. We're through, I find it in this crazy old world. Need strategies, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Every time I listen, Lauren and David share strategies for living, and it makes me aware. I got strategies for living, strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab. Strategies for living radio. Your dose of radio rehab.
You know we need them. Yeah, we need strategies. There are some things we need more strategies around than other things. Welcome, folks. Welcome into Strategies for Living. I'm Dr. David McMillan. She is psychotherapist, POPC Lauren Leon McMillan. I'm going to start with this.
Oh, Lord. Yep.
Yeah, a penny saved is a penny earned.
Is it?
Yeah, you need to tighten your belt.
Oh, right. You know what else we need?
Yeah?
Money.
Oh, money. Yeah, I remember that.
Must be funny.
Sometimes money is funny and sometimes it is beyond funny. But I tell you what money is.
It's cotton?
You know, it's weird.
Yeah?
Money is weird. And our life strategist today, it's not you need to tighten your seat belt, not your belt. That's one of those old sayings.
Right.
Tighten your belt, right?
That's right.
A penny saved is a penny earned.
Mm-hmm.
Like, got to bring home the bacon.
Doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah.
And yet.
You were born with a silver spoon in your mouth.
Oh, yeah.
All of those.
Yeah.
Money is weird. Lev Mendel is our life strategist today. And, you know, both of us, I think, had the same response when we first picked up this book.
Oh, man, it's a neat book.
It's a
really
little
neat
book.
little book.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to consider some of the things that he presents.
And I'm so glad that he did it in the form of a book workbook.
Yes.
Because who doesn't need help? Whether you've got a bunch of it, you know, and I, through the years, I've had a lot of clients that have a bunch of it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, most every one of them are scared to death of losing it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it all comes back down to beliefs, right?
It
what
does.
we've decided to agree upon as valuable.
Yeah.
And what that means to us.
And what that means, because money's weird.
Yes, it is.
Lev Mendel, our life strategist today. We have got, everybody better buckle their seatbelt. We've got a lot to learn today here on Strategies for Living. Appreciate you being with us and appreciate our sponsors making it all possible. The Robinson Film Center and Azalea Cleaners and Pintail Roofing and Learning RX. We train your brain. The Balanced Life Wellness Center, Fertitta's Delicatessen, home of the Godfather, Alligator Italian Sausage, and pretty good Muffies, too. SRT, Sales Training, Uprising, Addiction Center, and Mira, Direct Primary Care. Money's weird. Lev Mendel is going to help us figure it out today here on Strategies for Living. Come back with us.
Tune in daily, find the light. Healthy mind and spirits bright. Strategies for living strong. Feel the vibe, it won't go wrong. Body moves and soul align. Catch the rhythm, feel the time. Radio rehab every day. Chase those clouds of gray away. Your daily dose of radio rehab. Lift you up when skies seem trapped. Mind and body, spirits free. Living life in harmony.
And welcome into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillan, David McMillan. Let's welcome into the program now Lev Mendel. He helps people create space to focus on what really matters and align their time and money with it. For 10 years, he's worked with curious, thoughtful humans navigating meaningful change. Big questions and a lot of stuff in between. Holds a master's degree from the London School of Economics and a bachelor's degree from the University of Michigan. Lives out in San Francisco with his wife and a couple of children. And Lev, that lemonade stand that you started sold exactly 0 lemonades, right?
That's right.
Welcome to Strategies. It sounds like some of my entrepreneurial adventures.
I think a lot of us can relate.
Yeah.
But David, Laura, thanks so much. First off, just thanks so much for having me on. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Absolutely. I can't speak for Lauren because I hope that I know more than that therapeutically. But I know my immediate when I got the book in, when your publicist sent me the book and I unwrapped it, saw the title, it immediately, I was hooked. I was hooked right there at the title. Money is Weird. Yeah. Man, you nailed it.
Yeah.
And did you think
Isn't it weird?
Yeah. Yeah. So she thought the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to be, full disclosure here. It's funny, so Carissa Potter, who is the publisher and also the artist who did the art in the journal, her and I, over multiple, Zoom meetings are trying to figure out the title, and we both came up with multiple ideas that I think we thought were good at the time.
Sure.
But at one point, Carissa says, "What about Money is Weird?" And as soon as I heard her say that, it was like, boom, that's it. That's what we're doing. And it just really worked.
But I think so many people don't even think in that way to question. I think on an emotional level, we can all agree, yeah, money is weird. But let's just kind of assume, right? So what do you actually mean? And how can you break that apart for people who haven't really thought about what money actually is and why is it so weird?
Yeah, well, I think that's such a great question. And I think at the core of it too, really, intellectually, we don't totally agree on what money is.
Yeah.
So there's an argument that it's a commodity and a store of value and an exchange, and those are all true. And it's also a credit and debit system, which is also true. Yeah. It's also socially constructed as a credit and debit system. I also think it's one of the coolest human inventions because it makes it so that we can, trade across the world easily without having to figure out, how many cows equals how many, chickens. Yeah. But, I think, but I think really at the core of it too, it's what's underneath. It's the underlying feelings. It touches, we've all experienced these feelings of safety, the most kind of tender emotions of safety, fear, comfort, hope. Money is connected to all of these things. And so often when we're thinking about money, there's a lot more underneath than maybe what we initially think of as just the numbers with the money.
Yeah.
I mean, would you say that people's relationship with money is more psychological than it really is financial or mathematical?
Yeah, that's great. I think the one thing that's really interesting about money is that we are all so different and have such different relationships to money and such different experiences growing up around money. So I think we all, and some people really embrace the numbers. And I like math. I really like the numbers. I find comfort in numbers, probably mostly because I grew up in the bathtub with my mom playing math games with me, and I thought it was fun. But I think, so we all kind of are different there. But I would say that, as a financial advisor, one of the things that I've really noticed is that, the numbers can look really good. They can look not good. But even when the numbers look really good, it's not always, totally clear. There's still feelings. There's still feelings around security. There's still feelings around kind of the psychology, money. I think a really good example is, someone whose parents went through the Depression era. Mm-hmm. And so, really were always saving and really had that scarcity, kind of as a real thing. And so, growing up with that, and then I think, you can have, your relationship to money can change, your financial situation can change, but a lot of these early habits that we developed around money, if we're not aware and we're not curious, often don't change,
Yeah.
and then often don't serve us well. So I think, and just to kind of come full circle here, the example of, someone who grew up in a situation when, their folks went through the Depression is, constantly like question, hey, can I afford this refrigerator? But what the numbers say is that you can afford to do everything you want to do, plus do it twice. But there's still that question about can I afford this refrigerator? And it's real, it's human, and it's a real feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. What, in your experience, Lev, what are some of the strangest, maybe unconscious, but strange beliefs that people carry about money?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the really interesting things to me, at least, is, because, as humans, we're so complicated that in some ways, I say, my relationship to money, but even my relationship personally to money is complicated.
Sure.
And, sometimes I find myself in a room with people that I know have a lot of money, and I find myself being nervous or timid or uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I have to kind of sit myself like, why am I uncomfortable around this person? And just because they're, have more money doesn't mean that they're better than me, or, and I should feel comfortable around them. But I think at the same time, so I've got this experience where I kind of glorify money. But then also, there's situations where I'll see, maybe, a situation where I think, hey, gosh, I think that's, not an appropriate thing to do with your money. And maybe I judge someone who has a lot of money and I don't feel that they earned it in an ethical way. And then I'm kind of got this negative connotation to money. So I'm both looking up to it and aspiring to it. And I'm also have a negative feeling towards, that doesn't align with my values. I don't agree. So I think really what I'm saying, though, is it's so complicated, even just within one of our relationships to money. And so I think, kind of pulling these things out can be helpful. And it's also really helpful to say, this is okay. I don't have to, it's okay that I'm feeling both these different ways. And I don't need to feel guilty about it or self-conscious about it. And I'm just kind of, isn't this interesting that I'm feeling this way?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, Lauren and I are respectful of Dr. Freud, but neither one of us are really Freudian. But
okay,
how much of our money relationship really is about your mother?
Great question. Well, I'll tell you what, when you guys were doing the intro and you were talking about tightening the belt, and a penny saved, I thought of my mom, because we had I remember these early conversations. The funny one, the one that always stuck with me that I can still hear my mom say is, money burns a hole through your pocket.
Yeah.
And,
Yep.
And so, I think certainly, part of what the journal's looking at is that we really developed our relationship around money, habits around money, ways we cope around money really early on. And so, one thing I like to say is it's kind of impossible to have a relationship with your mom without money. So, these things early on, I think we're just kind of learning things and picking stuff up, but we're recognizing how money is used to reward or punish us, or to show us that we're loved, show us that we're cared for. And, and we're kind of picking up on these things.
Yeah.
And so, I think we can make a really good case that, a lot of our especially earliest kind of feelings and habits and behaviors around money are learned and mostly from our mom, and dad and people around us close in the house.
Yeah. I love the subtitle. Of course, I love the title, Money's Weird, but I love the subtitle too, a workbook to help you build awareness, get curious, and feel better about money. Yeah. So I'm zooming in right on the awareness and the curious. How many people, besides our very smart listeners hearing us now, but how many people are curious about money? Just naturally curious?
Good question. I don't think most of us are, I would say, I think a lot of us are curious of like, okay, how could we make more money or invest money to be efficient and invest well? And that's really important. But I think it's not normal to us, because I think that most of us grew up learning that, hey, money, you don't talk about money. You certainly don't brag about it.
Yeah.
And you don't, and if you don't have it, you do everything you can to kind of fit in and not feel like you're, less than, and you want to be part of the community. And so I think, we don't talk about it. We tend to not be, taught to be curious about it.
Right.
And I would say this too, and I think things have changed more, but also I would say, as growing up as a young boy, I don't know that I was even encouraged to really, think much about how it felt, or being curious about those feelings.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's both kind of the approach of, hey, let's start to get curious here. Let's build awareness. And that's okay. And also, I think the one of the things, a really funny and I thought good example of the awareness thing was, I remember, my first girlfriend in high school that I really liked. And I just kind of had the sense that she was going to break up with me. And I was totally anxious about it the whole time. And, to tell it when's it going to end. When she finally broke up with me, the first feeling I felt was totally relieved, because it just happened.
Yeah.
I knew I was aware. Hey, it happened. I don't have to,
I don't have
keep
to worry
spinning my
about
mind
this
about it anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
That's an
Right.
interesting.
And I think
that's an interesting. I got to get a break here, Lev. But that's an interesting point that we'll pick up on when we come back.
Right.
Money is Weird. That's the name of Lev Mandel's book. He's our life strategist today. We've got a lot more to learn here on Strategies for Living. Stay with us.
We all have problems every day. We all need help along the way. We need strategies for living radio.
Yeah, we need them. We especially need those strategies about money, because and that's the title of the book. Money is Weird.
And how much is Lev paying you to say that?
Well, I'm don't worry, I'm sending him the bill.
there we go. All right.
All right, you can find Money is Weird wherever you buy books. You can also go to peopleI'veLoved.com. You say the book is written by Lev Mandel and people I've loved. I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay, this sense of really, you were saying, you just kind of knew this girlfriend was going to break up with you. And when she did, there was this sense of relief.
Right.
So, I mean, are you saying, Lev, that, I'm over here thinking, oh, I'm going to go broke. I'm going to go broke. I'm going to go broke. I'm afraid I'm going broke. I'm afraid I'm going to go broke. And I may have $20 million in the bank, right?
Right.
But then I go broke.
Right. And so that's where awareness comes in, right? But I think, what's really important, I think, is that particularly in our financial lives, especially for those of us that, have a history of avoidance. And I'd love to circle back to that too, because I think that's a big one. But, for any of us who have had a history of avoidance around our financial lives, it's been easier and probably worked for us at some points to just say, I'm not going to open that statement, or I'm not going to look at that right now, and I'm not going to know. Right. And I think, though, what's really important in both life and I think I love how you say strategies, because I think this really is a strategy, but you wouldn't necessarily think of just being aware as a strategy. But I think the strategy is that knowing, regardless of what it is better than the unknown, at least in terms of our anxiety because as soon as I just know the data, at least my brain's not going to keep spinning. I can price it in. I can start to figure out, okay, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And so, I think that's really important.
None of us can change what we don't acknowledge. Right. So,
Exactly.
And that's part of why I love the way your book is structured. I mean, it's structured to bring that awareness to the surface in a way that only the questions are insightful, but also fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. I mean, I think, it's funny because when I say, I often like to say fun, and I have a hard time saying it because, people look at you when you talk about financial planning and fun in the same sentence and kind of get an eye roll.
Yeah. Well, some people,
well,
I'm sure would say, how dare you have fun with money?
Right. Absolutely.
And that's
but
one
I
of those
think,
beliefs,
Lauren,
isn't it?
yeah, absolutely. And that it always has to be so serious.
Right.
But I think, part of the fun part, and I think this comes from working with clients a lot, is that, it can be really fun if it aligns with what is really important to you. And I think that's a whole other thing, because sometimes, for a lot of us, it's really hard to figure that out too. And that's not an easy thing. And that takes a lot of curiosity and a lot of work. And so, I think it can be really fun, but also, I think part of how I transitioned into financial advising was, I taught algebra 2, which is not the fun part of math. And, I got excited, like, oh my God, this is going to be such a fun lesson on compound interest. And look at this, guys, look at this, kids. It's going to be someone, you're going to love this. And maybe one kid got excited, and I'm sitting there like, oh gosh, okay, that didn't go well. But, I think in terms of making it fun, approachable, non-judgmental. I think we've all got a lot of guilt often around money. So really just kind of wanting to, I think maybe the most important first step is creating this safe space. And so that it feels safe, right? Because we haven't had that experience in the past.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What are some signs, do you think, that a person might need healing, might need to do some healing around their relationship to money? What signs might they need to look at or be aware of?
Yeah, that's a really important question. I think, I'll start out for me personally. I think, I work, in finance, but if I didn't, I think I would still think about money all the time. And I do. And so, I notice, being on vacation and I'm in my head, I'm trying to figure out why the latte's $18 and the, croissant's $13. And then I'm not enjoying the latte and the croissant. Right. And, so I think, but I'm always thinking about it, and and I see, I can notice patterns in myself where I'm, short with my kids or with my wife because I'm stressed about money. They don't know that I'm stressed about money in my head, but it impacts me, so I think, kind of just how much we're thinking about it, starting to be aware of how our body feels around it, those type of things, I think, are a good sign. So, and I was not aware that I tense up my shoulders. I wasn't aware that, my palms get a little sweaty until I started to be, hey, how does my body feel here? And I think one of the books that was really helpful for me as I was kind of writing the journal and figuring this out is a book called Unwinding Anxiety by Dr. Judson Brewer. And he kind of did a really good job of laying out the cognitive behavioral therapy of trigger, behavior, result. And I liked that. But I think what was really, really interesting is his idea of like, okay, once we start mapping out these habit loops, our natural human, we've been taught to, okay, now we have to fix it. But rather than fixing it, take a second, get curious about what it feels like. And just sitting with those feelings, for me at least, have helped, reduce the anxiety.
Yeah.
You may be an exception to this, Lev, but I'm pretty sure that most financial advisors out there don't, after they sit down and listen to a new client, try to help the client as best they can and refer them to a therapist. But what you've done in this book, what it seems to me you've done in this book is, in a fun way.
Yes.
That's therapy. I'm coming to therapy in here. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. And that means, even more coming from you. So thank you. But, I think I think we all need financial therapy. We all need therapists, and I think therapists, especially those who kind of can be helpful around money issues, I think are really important and
Right.
really valuable. And I think one of the things I think that to me is both really important about both therapy and financial life planning is that we often don't take the time to do it. And I think one of the most incredible things, at least for me, about therapy is the fact that I'm spending 50 minutes focusing on me. And there's very few times during the day that I'm spending a full 50 minutes focusing on me.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the goal of when we're really creating this space for clients to look at their financial situation, their money alignment, their relationship to money, is that we're creating this space to do this together and to, create the space to really get curious and to really explore these things. And I think, and I think that is just really invaluable. And I think just like a really good therapist, often I don't want to give advice. What I want to do is I want to help you figure out what works for you. And we can have data and we can run scenarios and we can stress test a plan and we can do all these things. But really what's most important is that the planning work we're doing together, you're getting what you need to really make intentional decisions that work for you.
Yeah. I think it's a pretty universal thing. We all fear losing money. But some people that I've worked with through the years have a fear of money coming into their life, gaining money.
Right.
What's that about?
Right.
What is that about?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think the best way I can answer that actually is from a personal experience. I was the 5th employee at an early startup that made games on Facebook. And we got an offer from a big company to be acquired. I was, at the office at 9:30 at night, like I was pretty much every weekday when that happened. And I did a little back of the envelope calculation and said, wow, that's a lot of money for me. And I thought that I was going to just be so excited and like be in a rap video and just be like all this joy. And I wasn't. I was anxious and lost. I didn't know what I wanted to do. All I did was work. All I did was kind of chase this corporate ladder. And I had a moment where it didn't feel exciting and it felt like pressure. It felt like, it didn't feel right. And I think, what that maybe was for me was that it wasn't enough money to totally not ever have to work again and figure out totally what I wanted to do. So what it felt like is I felt trapped that I was just going to have to keep making more and the goalpost was going to keep moving. And I was kind of in this race that I didn't want to be in anymore. I was on the wrong curve.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's some of that. I think also, depending on the situation that you come from, especially if you grow up, struggling with money and then you make a lot of money, you've got a whole situation with family and friends who are maybe depending on you or want you to share. And that's really tough and can be really hard. And certainly, that's, that can be a way people lose money too.
Yeah.
So I think, a lot of it too is, kind of, this idea that money is such a big part of our identity. Yeah. So if we come into money or lose it, how does that change our identity and how we view ourselves?
Well, it just underscores the title of the book. Money's Weird. Lev Mandel is our life strategist today. Money is Weird, wherever you find books. And you can go to peoplei'veloved.com. But you need to get a copy of this book, Money is Weird. We've got more with Lev Mandel today here on Strategies for Living. Come back with us.
We all have problems every day. We all need help along the way. We need strategies, strategies, strategies for living radio.
Lev Mandel, who is our life strategist today, is underscoring for me that some of us need more strategies around certain things. And maybe we all need strategies around money because
I think we do.
Yeah, I think we do.
I mean, it's been ongoing for all of history, right?
Yeah.
All of the
As
the
long as there's been
stories
some
and
kind
the-
of exchange,
right,
yeah.
the stories and the moral ethics that have evolved around it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Welcome back, folks, into Strategies for Living. Lauren Leon McMillan, David McMillan. Our life strategist today is the author of a great little book. You got to get a copy of this. Every household needs a copy of this.
Every person in the household. because
Every person in the
needs
household.
to
That's
do
a
the
good
work.
idea, especially if you got teenagers.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
man,
the
what
book
a
is
gift.
Yes.
What a gift for teenagers.
Oh man, graduation gift. This would be a great one. The book is called Money is Weird, and it's actually it's a book, but it's also a workbook. It's a workbook, and
It's an experience.
yeah,
I think if you do it, do it the way Lev's intended.
yeah. Lev Mandel, and you can go to peopleI'veLoved.com. And man, what is the biggest thing that when a client comes in, is there a most common issue that when they come in and meet you, they've heard all about you and how great you are? What do most sit down and want to know?
Oh, what a great question. I think, first, I think it's just interesting in terms of kind of what people, are expecting from a financial advisor in general. And then, kind of depending on, who maybe, who they heard about me from and kind of, those ones actually are really nice because I think usually it comes from a client who said, oh, we did all this work and it's kind of fun and you're going to cry. And I love that. Right. But I think, the expectation for most people of what a financial advisor or planner does is not that. And so I think the hardest one is just, hey, I want to make more than the S&P 500, but I don't want to take any risk.
Yeah.
And that's just something that, is totally impossible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And, but I think just the expectation around, especially because, we were not taught financial literacy in school for the most part. So just kind of the idea of like, what does it even mean to own stock and index funds and versus bonds? And, so I think just kind of saying, hey, the goal here is not to make as much money as we possibly can. The goal in life is not to be the richest person in the cemetery. The goal in life is to live a wonderful life that aligns with what's important to you and spend the time doing the things you want to be doing. And of course, we want you to be safe and have enough. And then, circling back, though, I think there's also a portion of, and it's a really, really important question that we hear all the time is, do I have enough? Do I have enough to retire? Do I have enough to do the things I want to do? Do I have enough to cover long-term care? And so I think that's probably the question that, if there was one that was the most popular, it's kind of, hey, help me answer this question. Do I have enough?
In the last, 20 years or so, especially, what has appeared on the scene, social media, now AI, everybody's talking about AI. How has how's social media and even AI impacting our relationship with money?
There's a great example in one of my favorite books called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And he gives a really great example of the 1950s. So we have this kind of idea of the 50s of being, oh man, we were growing and there was all this economic growth and opportunity, and there certainly was. But by any measure, we are better off now than we were then. The problem is there is a lot more visibility and inequality. Yeah. So in the 50s, maybe your boss, made more than you, had a slightly bigger car, but pretty much had the same house, lived in a similar neighborhood, and went on similar vacations. Now, we're seeing this whole different class, I guess, of kind of, and you see it visibly on Instagram of people sitting courtside at basketball games and flying private jets, and it's visible.
Yeah.
You see the shows on TV.
Yeah.
And so I think, one of the things I think is just really important to understand about, humans and our relationship to money is we're really good at making things, comparing ourselves to other people.
Yeah.
Right. And so if we're seeing that, it feels a lot different. And so, I think the social media really plays a huge role in that. And, it makes things so much more visible and kind of upfront, and you see the inequalities. And I think, that's especially hard, and especially hard, especially for the younger generation who's seeing that all right in front of their face all the time. And, I grew up in the late 80s, early 90s. And, I certainly, know how much, kind of the media impacted me with, Air Jordans and that whole world. I can't imagine if I saw that all the time on my phone when I was 17.
Yeah. 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 Lauren and I know some teenagers today that don't even think a thing about, they don't blink when they ask their parents for $1,000 pair of jeans.
Pair of jeans.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't understand at all.
We opened the show with some trite sayings, right? Mm-hmm. So let me throw another trite saying in here. I didn't see this one in the book. An attitude of gratitude. Mm-hmm. How much is gratitude? How much is the idea of gratitude important around finances and money, Lev?
It's huge. And I think I want to be really upfront that I've not had a good history of gratitude. I actually, and this goes back to how the journal started. I bought a journal called Lots of Thanks, a year-long gratitude journal that was made by people I've loved and Carissa Potter. And what I loved about it was I just had to write one thing that I was thankful for each day. So I could do that. I'm not a good journaler all the time. And it's funny because I wrote a workbook. But part of it is, and part of making it fun and the right questions is to remove friction, right? And so this was, to me, a frictionless gratitude journal. I could do it in 3 minutes or less. I didn't have a ton of pressure, and it worked for me. That turned into us doing a gratitude journal for clients. And then it actually turned into Carissa and I doing Money is Weird. And so, I think, though, it's so easy. And as humans, there's great data around, investment losses are more than twice as bad as investment gains. And as we act as humans, it's really easy to get anxious and sad and angry around money, but it's not as easy to be grateful. Yeah. And it's not as easy to look at what we have that, we really should be thankful for every day. Yeah. And, I think, it's important, and it also really puts things in perspective about really what matters. And so I think it's a huge part of financial planning, and making sure, that when we're doing planning, it's like, what are we planning for? Yeah. And we're planning for something that really means something to you. And, we want to take the time to also be grateful to be able to do those things.
Yeah. Money's Weird, Lev Mandel. Go get this book, folks. Money, wherever you buy books, Money is Weird. And you can check out peopleiveloved.com. We'll be back to wrap up our conversation today with the author of Money is Weird, Lev Mandel. Be right back. I'm asking for more time, and the producer is shaking his head, and he's shaking something else at me too. Yeah. The reason we need more time is, folks, you've got to continue the conversation with Lev Mandel that we're starting today. The book is Money is Weird, and so that's the way you can continue the conversation with him. peopleiveloved.com. Lev, we got a minute. What do you want people to take away from our conversation today and this book?
I really think the most important thing is that it's okay to be curious. Mm-hmm. And let's embrace that curiosity. Let's have a little bit of fun around money, but I think also, let's give ourselves grace. Let's look at progress more than comparing to some ideal world. And I think, to leave it, just on the last thing is I really want people to view this journal, Lauren, just like you said, as an experience and as a safe experience to explore your feelings around money. And hopefully, what that means is that, it not only improves your relationship to money, but helps improve, the relationships with all the people in your life,
Right.
and helps you really get to spend the time doing what you want to be doing.
Absolutely.
Lev will definitely have you back. Thank you for being a great life strategist. Thank you for the book. Folks, go get Money is Weird, Lev Mandel. Look forward to the next time, Lev.
Oh, thank you guys so much. I look forward to it as well. And really, it's just such a pleasure.
Folks, thank you for tuning in to Strategies for Living. We appreciate you, and we appreciate our sponsors who make it all possible. The Robinson Film Center and Azalea Cleaners, Pintail Roofing, Learning RX, We Train Your Brain, The Balanced Life Wellness Center, Fertitas Delicatessen, home of The Godfather, Alligator Italian Sausage, some pretty good muffies too, SRT Sales Training, Uprising Addiction Center, and Mira Direct Primary Care. If today were the last day of your life, you only had one more phone call that you could make, who would you call? What would you say? And why are you waiting? Make the call. For Lauren Leon McMillan, for Lev Mandel, I'm David McMillan. See you next time right here on Strategies for Living.